Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the MoonCast podcast, where we talk about digital assets, digital payments, and everything beyond. I'm Razin Nizar, and as per usual, I'm joined by my MoonCast to my Suncast, Sanat Karkar, legal expert from LPO and Law. And today's a very special day for a few reasons. Number one, we finally have our own t-shirt, the MoonCast t-shirt, courtesy of our guest today. And secondly, we'll be diving into an all-time favorite topic of mine, the reason why I started my career in the first place, anti-financial crime. And what better way to explore crypto financial crime than to have our very special guest, the fin crime warrior extraordinaire herself, Jessica Chuah. Jessica, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jess, and I'm excited to be on this podcast. I always wanted to be in a podcast. It's just that my day life is a bit busy. So until Razin and Sana officially invited me to this, I'm always happy to do podcasts and share knowledge across the board.
Yeah, you've been working a lot. Like I see your posts from law enforcement agencies in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Singapore recently, and you also work with Interpol. Tell us about all of that experience.
So as I got to know you back in ISCTF, and of course, I came from the vendor space. Much like Razin, I am also an end user, which is like a compliance person. Is a practitioner for some time. And that is a spot that I really converted from end user to become vendor. That means we build products. So dealing with large data, my role, it can be, say, really frontline. But in fact, I was really managing internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. So let me explain that. So internal stakeholders is where we have a lot of data in terms of on-chain, and nowadays, when you talk about fraud investigation on-chain, you have to talk about off-chain. That means that you have to match with KYC data. But when you have a product like that, this is not the end of the story. You have to suit what end user wants. And that's where I got work with the Interpol guys, the law enforcement, and the crypto exchange. That's where I met Razin when he's back in Luno. We need to get feedback and to improve the experience on customer journey. And that's what I do. It's a full loop of product feedback. And also the best teacher in my life and in my job often is my end user. That means the person who use it and tell me, Jess, I feel like there are improvements. And that's what I do continuously. That's where I'm traveling a lot.
Yeah, and you started your career as compliance, right? Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you started your journey from compliance to fin crime?
So when I started my job, say not minusing the Big Four experience, when I got into the bank, which is the International Global Bank, HSBC, I was put in the very hot spot, which is called the global standards. Then HSBC was caught in something called Deferred Prosecution Act by the DOJ, because money laundering, cross-border, and it's not uniform among all the standards, the policies within all the global banks. I mean, not all global banks, but particularly in HSBC time. On the Mexico and the Brazilian branches, is not in sync with the Hong Kong or the UK. So I was put into this project for many, many moons. And I got into the understanding of loopholes where different geolocation, different typology, it may seem standard, but in real life it's not. Data points is actually quite different. So for example, if you have a less stringent data points in, say, underdeveloped countries like the African continent or the Latin America, when it comes to Asia, it's a bit more stringent. So you already have a problem by onboarding this customer. So this is where I start learning about compliance. I didn't come from the nice policy where everything is handed to me in a silver platter. I have to come in and dig in the problems and see the discrepancy and think outside the box how to solve it. So when my ex-company Chainalysis offered me the job, it was like, great, I can do a little bit more for the local market in Malaysia. So coming from this vendor space is all about problem solving. For me, it's not really coming from end user to frontline. It's the whole process of problem solving and seeing what is emerging and what are the threats, and we start thinking how to really mitigate and design controls around that.
Yeah, and I mean, it translates into your experience, right? You were in compliance for a bit, and then you transition into chain analysis as well as crystal intelligence. What is it about financial crime that really, why financial crime, basically? Why do you choose that path?
So financial crime is a very sexy term now, because AML, anti-money laundering, it can happen to anyone. Let's give me an example. Today, you have received a big pot of money coming from unknown sources. And the first thing, if you want to buy a house for your mom or help your mom to settle a mortgage, instantly you have put your mom in danger, or your family or the loved ones, because you are stuck in a process called source of funds. Please do explain the source of funds and the source of wealth. When you can't do that, you have opened a big Pandora box to about tracing where the money comes from. And when I was in ACCA, I remember this one sentence that it prompted me into getting into my whole career is follow the money trail. That was me since young. So FinCrime, to be honest, if you do have the right techniques and the experience and the right tool, you can really follow the money trail. It's like unrevealing the truth. But it's really depending on your investigation skills and how good are you to map out that MO and also the intention. So 3 of us here have legal background. Mens rea is hardest to prove, right? The intention. So I feel like that is really the end point. Once you have finished tracing the forensics part and the footprint, now it's like, well, they have to explain really what was their real intention. And that's the fun part for me. I'm not from law enforcement, but my day-to-day job is to assist law enforcement to establish this kind of intention, mainly the prosecutor, so that they can really put some people who is behind the jail with real hardcore facts and forensics evidence.
You pretty much laid out the most interesting part about financial crime for me as well, like following the money, proving mens rea, proving intention behind activities. We're going to dive deep into all of those topics when we, discuss about how to enter criminal minds, understanding them. But I think before we do that, let's do a fun quick fire icebreaker session. Sanat.
First of all, what is the most interesting crypto crime that should be a Netflix show?
Well, I feel like the one that I've seen in Netflix is Ozark. Well, when I was doing my ACAMS, part of my job is to review some Netflix studies. And probably this is where how people laundered money in 10,000 ways. And you will see that cases like that happening in Malaysia, because the typology, the culture, the hawala is a very different way. So I think like Ozark is great to compare, but nothing match with what I do in real life. That is, I go under the wall of unrevealing peer-to-peer transaction in crypto. And that one, I'm able to do my own Ozark in my own way, but it's in the Southeast Asian way. Let me just share with you one fun fact. Is that Southeast Asia is still pretty much unbanked population. I'm not talking about Malaysia or Singapore. Let's talk about the borders of Cambodia or the borders of all these Laos and the Golden Triangle. They are highly unbanked, highly populated. Guess what? They were using alternative payment mode than banking. And that's where I feel like the Netflix series of Ozark should expand into the Southeast Asian version or
That's
the
amazing.
more typology. Yes.
That should be like the next season they launch. It'll be based in Malaysia, and they should hire you as an executive producer to help them out with real life context. Screenwriter. There you go. How about if you would take one case that you came across, like a real case that you think it deserves a Netflix docuseries? Which one case you think would be fitted for that?
So there are many cases like that. And often you see that either it's a hack case or a scam case, or probably like a FTX case. People will just like misuse the fund. This is the oldest story in, CBT, criminal breach of trust. They have misused the fund of the company and use it as theirs. As legal trained, 3 of us here, we understand the trust law and of course the CBT. But I have one really interesting case I would like to share here. If you got to know this guy called Jimmy Zhong, and he have successfully tricked people the Silk Road on 500 Bitcoin back in September 2012. And he was so smart. These criminals is genius of mine. Why I picked this case is very simple. He was there when nobody understood about Bitcoin, and he saw the vulnerability about this Bitcoin, and he took the money, and no one believed in Bitcoin then. I'm talking about 2012. And when he's able to sort of like grow the fortune, like say year 2019 or 17, it was a big fortune. And I like this is because sometimes when we look into criminals these days, you thought that you're looking at Yakuza, you have a big branded, tattoo, or you have some skin hate, or you have your own little way of this stereotype, the stigma about like criminals, how they look like. Let me tell you this. These days, the criminals are geeks. They are the one who is very knowledgeable. And of course, they know more than you. And they're quietly exploiting the system without even you knowing. The case was actually only busted when he reported police that someone took his money, and the FBI actually just, they saw this like big piece of this computer. I mean, like the whole thing the whole computer, they went in and did the forensic. It's like, oh my God, Jimmy did that. So I wanted to pick this case is because you're somehow on the preconceptions about criminals is not really what you think. And in my real case, the peer-to-peer traders are also not what you think. They look like geeks. They look like a young boy who is like a GameFi guy. But when they open their hot wallet, you will drop your jaws. That will be the fun Netflix series that I feel like it will be a good way to tell and wake up people, because we always have the stigma about criminals.
Absolutely. This is a new breed of criminals, a lot more dangerous because they're inconspicuous. They could be in your coffee shop typing away and not knowing they have hundreds of millions of dollars in Bitcoin that they've stolen from somewhere. On that, then, who would you cast as Jimmy in this new Netflix series? If you can think of an actor. I'm thinking of Jesse Eisenberg. Do you think of someone that could be fitted for that nerdy type of persona?
Well, I'm not going to pick somebody like Jimmy Chang is a Chinese national.
The name was misleading, I have to say.
Is it Jack Black, the guy?
Jack Black? That'll be hilarious, yes.
That'll be hilarious.
That will be, when Jimmy Chang was out in the news, he has a lot of like girls surrounding with him. The typical way, the yacht, the glamorous lifestyle, the champagne, that kind. But I feel like having the Hollywood star to tell this story, it should be somebody who is a little bit more dynamic. And I'll change the race a little bit. Let's call it Jack Black.
Jack Black would be amazing. I agree.
It has to be funny, the cracking jokes at the same time he's funny. But you didn't know that what he's done behind is really dark. Yeah. The dark energy. You can be able to mask that out, So I think that will pick that. Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic choice. So who would be a better villain? North Korean hackers or crypto fraudsters?
I think either, because the skill set is pretty much different. One is they use pretty much machines and they are, national syndicate. Of course, imagine the Lazarus groups are operating like your SME bank, that kind. You have like your team lead, you have your tech expert, you have someone QCing, and you have your way to do it. When they profile that, they do it very systematically. And the crypto fraudsters are often using social engineering. The one-on-one kind of like crypto, like cybersecurity course that you go for phishing, like they mask and they lure you to give you all the access to them, password. That would be different skill set. One is really hardcore attacking. They have their own way to do it. The other one have to exploit emotions. They have to deal with humans, So I feel like they have really different skill sets into that.
Absolutely. One is psychopathic and one is more organized. I can absolutely see that. So what would be the biggest misconception about blockchain you want to address?
Well, a lot of people, first thing, they just name anything under the blockchain umbrella. Let's use this part here, because the blockchain developed is just a ledger. It was great. Where cryptocurrency is a medium you use. That's where you have your EVM compatible blockchain. You will have your Bitcoin blockchain. People don't understand this is two different things. Like you build a city using a blockchain, and on top in the city, how the people were talking to each other, trading to each other, they use their own coins. And the third misconception based on these two, crypto and blockchain, is that crypto is a scam. If you look at all the reports, not mentioning Chainalysis or Crystal Intelligence, the illicit funds is less than 1%. So it's just that little amount of people who is doing a really bad thing there. And because it's so nasty, it appeared on like social media, in, all the correspondent journals that you see. But in fact, the 99% of it, people are really using for investment. And that's it. I would like to, if I have a time, I have the opportunity to correct those stigma, I would love to do it. So the first thing that the police talk to me is that, Jessica, this crypto is nasty, it's for scam. No. When you are selling, if say that you are a gun manufacturer, you supply it to the government with license. That means that they use it to protect the country. But through some black market, you attain the weapons for some unknown reason, and you use it for kidnapping, and you use it for bad purposes. It's still the gun company. I don't know what the user's intention is. So this is why we talk about the mens rea, is that some people, blockchain is just a tool, but whether you're using for the good cause or the bad cause is really case to case basis.
Amazing. Really good and complete answer. And I cannot agree more. Blockchain is the technology. What you use it for is the problem. And the same thing with emails when they first came out. If you remember at the early age of emails, right? If you used emails to be a Nigerian prince asking people for money, that's a bad use, right?
Yeah.
Versus just, emailing people. So yeah, I get that. Final question. So what jurisdiction, in your opinion, has the best crypto regulatory framework and mandate in your view?
Of course, it's MiCA. It's Europe now.
Wow.
Of course,
Okay.
it's MiCA.
I didn't expect that. If you speak to builders and startups, they tell you it's the worst jurisdiction. Yep. But from a regulatory perspective, it might be the best one.
Yeah.
So actually, this market in crypto assets, it was great because even Binance now will have to think about the way they design the AML, and that affects their operational business. Because if MiCA required you to have stringent KYC controls, it's not like your self-regulation where they're going everywhere to apply licenses, trying their luck. The MiCA was a uniform standard. And because of that, if you're in the MiCA regulation, you can freely move around the 28 member states. That is a good one. But the bad one is that now you really have to comply. You have to use a legal opinion where you probably have a lot of business people calling up you for consulting business, the legal opinion, asset class. What is your view on that? That will be a booming business for you. For APAC, where I come from, that's a hard one. I manage 14 countries. That's a hard one. I pretty much, when I look at regulators, they are pretty much still like a very passive mode. They say they have a sandboxes here. They say that they can come in for like all the task force, let's talk about some regulation with the industry engagement. But to be honest, they're so clueless. If you're not on certain regulators' door, they're still pretty much trying to understand. And the first thing is that, where do I get the data? That is the problem, because peer-to-peer are supposed to bypass centralized regulation. Really, I'm asking them where you get the data, because it's totally decentralized, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that's when regulatory development can actually help try to harmonize the data collection between digital asset exchanges, custodian, different digital asset players in order to verify the traceability of criminal activities, right? So we talk quickly about like Netflix shows, we talk about North Korean hackers, crypto fraudsters, and then we briefly touch about misconception. I want to take us to, let's imagine if we are going to pitch a TV show to Netflix, right? I want to take us back to the criminal activities that exist within the digital asset space. Let's enter the criminal mind. So if we had to pitch to Netflix producers, let's pick one most popular criminal activity that you have encountered, for example, North Korean hacks. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. How does it work? Who are the players? And how can everybody like combat it?
Well, okay. So when it comes to like Lazarus Group, I feel like they pretty much do like what normal salespeople will do. They will actually look for a hot wallet that is like in terms of $1 billion size. So the
Yeah.
$1 million size was a little bit not their appetite anymore. So let's talk about DragonEx. The first hack they did it in the Singapore exchange was back in 2019. It was 7 million hacks. And then you have Axie Infinity. Then you have fast forward last year with ZeroX is about 240 million. I thought that was big. Until this year, we have the Bybit hack, 1.5 billion or more. Can you imagine that? What kind of sales channel they have to go through? It's like, yeah, the business is going great. So to start with, they are really good in profiling customers. And second part is that they will have to like watch and see how to attack these hot wallets. Obviously, they're going to be compromised with some of the security, and you can't really put all the money in cold wallet, sorry. Can you edit this out? You cannot put all the money in cold wallet because as an exchange custody, you need to let some money for your customer to withdraw funds, right? So they know that you have such and such money and they're going to plan to attack you. First thing is that they have to pick the right victims. So to pitch to that, this is already very challenging. I think that the audience want to see that how this small business can actually appear to be big in front of a target for the Lazarus Group.
Yeah. For our audience educational purpose out there, maybe what is the difference between cold wallet and hot wallet? And how are they hacked? Yeah.
How are they hacked? I can't tell you in specific because I have never hacked any exchange before. But cold and hot wallet is the management of that has to be on a very company level. A cold wallet is something like a nano, probably it's like this, a nano, and it's air gap. That means that one is offline, you can't take any money from that account. But you have to maintain your hot wallet with specific fund. Just imagine that as your online account in a bank. Okay. And of course, to compromise that is that, you know, what are the defense system you build around the hot wallet? Are you using this hot wallet kind of management where you actually, you know, the pen test, the normal thing that you do for helping, you know, to secure your funds when you can just take it out online. So these are the things that they actually know how to hack, and they are hackers. Okay. So for the sake of that, I'm just going to explain here. For more, we have to go for another podcast.
For sure. And sometimes I always think of how I would operate as a criminal, right? I would definitely have a target. And then in order for me to have a target, I will risk profile my victims based on the cases that has occurred before, like Bybit, DragonEx. Do you see any trend? Do you see any pattern of behavior where these organized syndicates profile their victims when it comes to hacking?
Of course, you have to be like, okay, there's one thing I can share is that they will profile someone where they have a weaker position in terms of like, they will get help the moment they get hacked. So often when the Lazarus way of hacking, it drains when they drain the money on the hot wallet, it's not in days. It's just going to be in like 90 minutes or like maybe just the same day. You're going to drain all the funds out. And how they make the money move on chain is really fast. They go through like DeFi, like Torchain, Wasabi Wallet. They go to like, you know, all these like different DeFi stuff. They will just go off chain, on chain, you know, they will go on different currency to just launder money out. Fast reliability is very, very important. So when they will profile these people, they don't know where to get help. For example, with ZeroX is actually an Indian, like custody insurance kind of company. India, you know that they don't really regulate crypto. So where these people is going to get help? The moment they find some investigator is going to help what's really happening, the fund is gone. I feel like this is like a bit like a kidnap case as well. You just have to know that someone is ready to help you. And that's why crypto investigation is very important, right? And of course, second part is that since they're so fast, they know that these companies are not ready to accept this disaster. So it will be in a whole panic mode. And you know social media, right? This Ben Chow from this Bybit, I think the next day he had to come out and say that no worries, they only hacked my money, they didn't hack your money. I'm sure that I'm going to return all this money. But back end of it, he's like, I know I'm so big. They know that this scale of business have grown out of control. And even to standardize and to do that within like a 1 week is so hard. When they do the profiling on a customer like that, say a customer like that, they already know that their disaster management or disaster recovery is almost like, it's very shocking to the whole entire organization. Plus the pressure of the customer. They know that it's a very human element here when they were designing the hacks as well. The technical part, they use machine. That one is already pre-planned. They know how to do it. But I feel like it's the element of how you're going to get out from the disaster, and everything is on social media, right? So
I'm glad you mentioned the Bybit case. In Bybit in February 2025 of this year, the breach clocked at $1.5 billion. And this is really the biggest crypto heist on record so far. Are we entering an era of mega scores, or will we see more smaller exploits instead, since now people's, let's say, alarms are on?
Well, you know the Olympic Games, right? They always have like Usain Bolt, like I don't know how many seconds they run, like how many meters. But I feel like this is like Olympic Games. It's going to be faster. It's going to be bigger. And it's going to break record. I feel like there's going to be more of this coming. And because they can do it, you know why? All the cases that we just mentioned, just one question on that. Have they been successfully recovered? We saw traces of where the money is going about, but can the victims, not talking about the Bybit case, let's say really, can you return the money to the end user? Not Bybit saying that I will take care of you because they stole my money, not the customer money. The answer is very slim, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And they know it's a business, right? What kind of business in 2025 you can actually do within like say 1 day and you get so much money in and people still don't know how to take care of the situation? You tell me, right? Sign up.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, it's a tough situation, 100%. And I think, as you said correctly, like these kind of incidents shake the confidence in the entire industry. We look at, like, for example, the programmatic and algorithmic tokens like Luna. Let's be very clear, not Luna, right? When it crashed, for example, and the entire cryptocurrency fell off, and then followed by the FTX scandal, investments in the entire industry as blockchain has dropped by 80% quarter on quarter for 8 consecutive quarters. And actually, we never came out of that decline just because of industry scandals of that size. But this takes us to the next question, because I know from your perspective, we talked about Open Ledger being a really good system versus the closed systems. So tell us a little bit more about the safety side of blockchain transactions. Aside from the hacks, aside from these, what kind of transparency it adds that traditional financial systems don't have?
Okay. When I got into this, and this is the most question was asked by my fellow bankers, where I came from, my old world, the TradFi world. The first question people will ask me is that, what is the difference with your online banking? So, Razin, that will be your Maybank to you or clicks on CIMB. Okay. So I want to tell them that fintech, you're just putting things online. Pretty much the ledger is still managed by a trusted third party called a bank. And the bank is run by a person. And that person, if they want license, they are managed by a board member called regulators, right? There will be tons of AML laws, banking law, bank secrecy law that you have to abide to maintain the relationship. But if you are transacting in blockchain, that means that you are doing something like in Web3, say for example, you do not need one person or the trusted third party managing that. Totally is peer-to-peer. That means that today I want to do a Bitcoin, you will have nodes. These are computers. They are like mining machines. They talk to each other, and it was programmed in a way that if you can solve the mathematical problem the fastest, you earn a fraction of Bitcoin. That's how you earn Bitcoin, as mining service, as a reward point. So all these are run by a piece of code. Okay. And now when you are doing this transparency here. The Web3 world, which is the Bitcoin world that we talk about, there is zero element of fraud on the Bitcoin itself because the nodes were running by codes, right? So this is good. And because it's so clear, you can see on a Tron scanner, Etherscan, everything is clear. Same thing like your bank transaction. Whereas your Web2 world, the TradFi world, you are still doing the ledger managed by a banker and you cannot be disclosed because of the inherent legal framework on that. The good and the bad thing is that this Web3 or the crypto blockchain transaction is truly decentralized, is transparent, and it's public and it's mutable. The other side will be all the opposite points where you can change the record, it's centralized, and it's not transparent, period. If you can know this is really good for keeping up a ledger. As a full-fledged accountant myself, that's what I yearn for. But you just don't know who is the person who owns this Bitcoin wallet. That is supposed to be the myth of you not knowing that person. But the transaction is online, is transparent.
Yeah, that's a very good detailed explanation of centralization versus decentralization, right? Like I had the same experience too. I had to explain that when it comes to centralization, transparency is actually one of the challenges, and decentralization, you actually get to trace, it's publicly available, for example, for blockchain and the blockchain explorer. Everything is recorded. And like what you said, it's not prone to fraud. So how is decentralization has helped the world trace or even discover financial crime activities?
Because when a trusted person like a bank or somebody who is managing your account, they can say no to you because they have reasons to reject or to accept, right? In most of our conversation in real human beings. But in decentralized, they don't have this decision-making point because it's a piece of code. You want to check, it's online. That's it, because you're dealing with machines. So technically, when it comes to blockchain, you are really not talking human language here. You're talking about programming codes. And the programming can't think. And therefore, with this lesser complexity of people trying to intervene, you can check anything that you want because it's a piece of record, it's a piece of ledger. You can move forward on building the ledger on the record. You can backtrace it. And because it's immutable, they also have the characteristic of permanence. It's permanently on blockchain, right? So when you don't have this decision making on to allow you to see or not by getting a warrant or some piece of permission in a court, you can know the truth. That's why blockchain is actually the truth. This is what I believe so, because the nodes that talking to each other forms the reality of what we are really having here. That is where the decentralized part of it do not intervene on you finding out the truth. That's what I'm going to answer your question, Razin.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely correct. Like one thing that I think most people tend to ignore is that in traditional centralized, in a traditional finance sector which relies on centralization, you probably need a request of information from the law enforcement agencies or a warrant to get that information, whereas in the blockchain, it's already available. Everything is traceable.
Permissionless.
Yeah, so
that's another characteristic. It's permissionless.
Permissionless. And we touched a lot on some of the cases, but what are some of the cases that you know that for sure would be hard to be traced in a traditional financial system, but the use of blockchain has successfully traced this criminal activity?
So you're asking me about typology, right? I would like to use this, but I will be carefully crafting my answer here. I work with anti-corruption agencies around the world, and actually not around the world, in APAC. Okay, so handling anti-money laundering cases and handling a political exposed person using crypto, to be honest, this is the hardest myth if the system itself is also protecting some powerful people, right? That is the TradFi Web2 world where human elements, like just now what we say, they can decide yes and no. The moment you touch on the sensitive group or the privileged group or those that is the top of the pyramid, you can be blocked in access in everything, right? And that's why you have high profile cases of corruptions and money laundering in the world, the scandals. But today, if you want to apply this into the blockchain world, just purely looking at transactions, I think that's a lot easier because you have already removed that permission system to permissionless system where you can feel freely access the data on the transaction and the forensic itself. Mm-hmm. But the hard part now is really like what I say in the beginning. You're supposed to be pseudo-anonymous and to pin down that whole thing with an intention, the menswear is hard. So you have the Web 2 world in the given world that you have the KYC information, then you start the investigation. Moving from that part to the Web 3 world that you have all the forensics and now pin that into one person, well, you pick the game. Which one is easier? But I like the anti-corruption case because it's a sensitive case. And at least I will believe that in the Web 3 world, I can see the money trail. I can see, okay, at least this is how much we're talking about here and what is the MO. So you pick the game. Which one is easier to you?
Absolutely. Speaking of that, okay, so this is really, I think, a good follow-on question on this. Shifting from like batch-based bank compliance to like real-time blockchain analytics, what were the immediate blind spots that legacy systems have when it comes to AML systems that jumped at you straight ahead when you first started reading blockchain transaction ledgers and tracking these type of transactions?
So I did both. World. So I feel like me and Razin probably have the taste of the both world. We work in the bank compliance thing. When we move to like crypto, we are the early adopters. And we can feel that the pain for both because we really have the hands-on kind of experience about this ledger balancing. So in the Web 2 world, you won't deal with too many currencies. If your banking license or say the exchange that Razin work with, they only can pair with 11 coins, is ringgit to say XRP, ringgit to Tron, that kind, roughly there's just 11 coins that you're dealing with. But because criminals are so smart, you keep on seeing that they have these ICOs coming out, the new coins, the stable coins, and now Hong Kong just regulate the stable coin bill. Technically, people can just launch their own coin and there will be many USDC and USDT coming out. That part of crypto, not investigation, let's say crypto transaction monitoring. You are dealing with, say, USD, Hong Kong dollars, Malaysian dollars, Singapore dollars versus like 3,000 coins out there. That will be hard because lacking of knowledge, lacking of skill set, lacking of tools, lacking of data, technically is now, it's a zero found, technically you can't do much investigation. I feel like a lot of compliance officer, they have very limited knowledge about bridging and also they have very limited knowledge about the new currencies. Some of them can't even differentiate what is stable coin versus a native coin like Ethereum. And the EVM compatible layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. And there comes on the new way of minting the new coins. That is very complicated. I think it's the complexity we're dealing here about investigation on transaction monitoring.
Speaking about that, this is a really good point as well that you mentioned. A lot of people lack the knowledge, but today we have this amazing things. Back in the day, we used to say Google things. Now you ChatGPT it or you Gemini it or use any AI model. So now we have a lot of AI models out there. And the latest report from Slight 8 shows that it cut false positive alerts by up to 40%. While TRM's April 2025 release brings a real-time pricing over 36 chain coverages, and it's growing. Now we see more AI models being able to cover all upcoming tokens and of that sort. Do you think AI will overtake human investigators, or is it playing now more of a role in your daily than before?
I love this question. Really, this AI, I would use it, is a double-edged sword. For me, AI is great if the predictive modeling is great because it's like a crystal ball. But again, AI was trained on machine learning. That means that you have to consistently feed data. You have to ingest a large amount of data to have the right algorithm. Predictive modeling is great, but the accuracy is QC by human. we human these days are really talking about QCing. That's why they always have a caveat here is that you have to reread and to proofread what has been prompted out by your own prompts, okay? Investigation can never be replaced by AI because compliance, yes. Investigation, no. Compliance is pretty much use AI for fraud detections. And you roughly can tell that similar risk score of this customer onboarded will have linkage of what kind of fraud percentage or what kind of related fraud percentage if you onboard that person. Again, it's just a preempting method for you to make the decision on your own because it's compliance, right? You're depending data to make informed decision on board, off board, approve transaction or flag out this transaction to regulator. But on the other hand, for investigation, is 100% manual because the predictive modeling is for future purposes. Investigation, you're moving backwards. And these things always move on because what had happened, and you have to figure out within the cooperative manner, like these pieces of information was presented here, was presented then. What is your investigation objective? And therefore, this is pretty much 100% manual because this is not repetitive. This is very unique case. AI can't do manual work. AI can't do unique situation. To figure out a pattern, again, I mentioned, it has to be predictive. You have to ingest a lot of data and to test the algorithm. And therefore, investigation itself is really unique in every situation because you are dealing with odd situations, odd circumstances, and weird facts most of the time. Because these are anomalies, they are really unusual and they're suspicious. Probably is a post-event as well.
Yeah. And predictive scoring through AI definitely is very limited to the data, like what you said, limited to the data fed into the system. And when the data set is limited, it can lead to biased results, right? For example, if we keep on feeding the same transaction pattern into data, the AI may not learn other forms of transaction patterns, therefore may ignore them. So we talk about that in transaction monitoring, but have you ever encountered any criminal activities in your experience that have used AI to do criminal activities?
Of course. But talk to police. And I love that they are generous amount of sharing with me because when they present the transaction data, well, of course, we also have to know that what were the so-called the MO, right? So AI is not used in what you think about being predictive on how to scam people because that part is just who to scam. Like you have a parameters like, okay, these people are rich, that kind. But AI now was used in KYC, the biometrics part. So if you talk to enough police, which I have the opportunity to, the onboarding on the KYC is really being attacked the most in terms of for the banking sectors or even any, what I mean here? If I tell you that, Jessica, now I'm a lady, my demographic is I'm a lady, I'm in my, I'm not so old, but I'm a female, guaranteed. And I look like I'm Asian. Of course, I have black hair, right? And I have the feature of an Asian girl. With AI out there, you can have 20 Jessica. I can be a California man who has short hair, blue eyes, talking the same way as somebody that I can be a Nigerian lady who has a short hair and I can speak differently. They will try to use as a different fake identity to get onboarded to the banks or crypto exchanges. That is AI already. That's deepfake that we're talking here. And that is identity theft. Or not even identity theft. Say that you're creating a new image that if your biometrics is weak and you cannot filter out, you may onboard a suspicious person here. And this is real because in crypto money laundering cases, despite how you do the mixing and how you cash out, there's another element is that they use fake IDs and they will use mule accounts. They will use like fake people's PI information, personal identifier information to be onboarded so they can take the money out. This is another element on how you try to cash out money from crypto to fiat. This is a very important element. And police is having this problem here. This person does not exist. This KYC person, KYC ED, Yeah.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because recently Unit 42 from the Threat Intelligence Department of Palo Alto Networks issued a document showing that over 42 cases of North Korean IT workers using real-time deepfakes in job interviews to infiltrate Western firms. And they've also used, which is really funny. I'm just imagining the interview going. How should compliance teams now verify KYC when faced with passport fakes and even synthetic videos that are typically used in these KYC software?
I can't answer you this because this is really beyond my job knowledge. But I want to tell you, at the moment, you don't have a system to prevent AI fraud. Because when you talk about biometrics, you're talking about data points. And I think the way to move forward is that you have to make sure the data points is as much as possible. Don't reduce it. And when you match it back to the passport on the clarity, some bank firms, they will use it like 75% matching and they will onboard that. When you do the product testing, I would say don't go so low. Go a little bit more like 85, 90%. That means that this passport belonging to that person, you need to be almost 90% or 95% sure that you're onboarding the right person. I feel like that is the closest you can go, because based on our research, you just need about $50 to $100 to buy an Indian or a Nepalese fake passport. Do you know how cheap you can really attain this so-called people's passport, and they have zero criminal records because, they have obtained that illegally. And I feel like to deter this risk, really, you can't have and compromise with lesser quality of, clarity on that proof of documents. That is the only way. You have to stand strong with your standards here, because some people will have this dilemma is that if I set too high up, it will affect my business.
Yep. I can imagine. It's like the user experience, right? Like nothing. I've dealt with this so many times living here in Bahrain. We have something called Benefit where you can pay people and it does a KYC. And I tried to scan my card 16 million times with it. It never worked. Eventually, you have to come to the office because your ID was issued an older date. And that pissed me off to the point that I said, I'm not going to use their service. So I do understand from the business side, they might face frustrations if higher accuracy might be required, but it's an absolutely needed thing today.
I'm not safe to conclude that, but I feel like from Jessica's point of view, business dealing, you want to handle with real people. I know Razin in real person, in his flesh and blood. I've seen him many times and I know he existed, and therefore I will do business with him because I know him first. And when you are meeting someone online and you're onboarding someone using eKYC and totally global business, like the crypto business is using a lot of this, like no human to human interaction, is all purely on online biometrics onboarding system. You know what business you're going into. Therefore, you can't compromise with the lesser standards, even though it's not striving for your business. But think about risk. If you have just one North Korean guy become your employee, like what you say, or you have only onboarded someone, your IP, what you have worked for in the company, have just leaked out everything. And you can be branded as XX firm, have relationship with a sanctioned country online. That is so unnecessary, right? It's about risk management in a more sustainable manner in terms of just business driven.
Yeah. You hit it right on the nail. Like the key word here is sustainable. Like businesses need to accept that when you rely on eKYC, you also need to spend resources on manual KYC, which means if it gets rejected, if that has high number of rejection, then you need human resources to verify the identity of a potentially fake IDs, right? And on the flip side as well, in non eKYC world, there are still cases where real human being are actually being used as mule. So my point here is, I've encountered where companies, use some directors that don't even know these businesses exist as directors. So my point here is these risks exist in both internet onboarding process and KYC onboarding process. It exists in both. But specifically on eKYC, do you think our current regulatory landscape is enough to combat fraud? Or if it's not enough, what more can be done?
So, Razin, I will not talk and answer the question and based on like line-to-line compliance method, because the KYC standards have loosened up because they now will actually make sure the firm or the company do their own risk management, and the regulator will be just, reviewing annually. They pass the risk back to the firm. That's why they have to buy insurance. They have to bet 1-to-1 on their funds. But let's say that if today I'm doing business with somebody, prior to establish on a business relationship, it's your duty to deal until it satisfies your appetite for risk. Because once the transaction has done, especially on chain, which is the Web3 world, it's irrevocable, right? So a lot of people telling me what KYC, what compliance standard you need to do. To be honest, different time will have different ways of doing that. You need to know what you're really onboarding and what you're really facing. And I want to come back to the directors. A lot of directors, they probably are baby boomers in a big conglomerate, public listed company. And then you have a small fintech firm, because I see this a lot in the Japan business. They will have a small arm about DeFi, Web3, transformation unit. And if I'm the director, whether I know about the business, their head is technically on the chopping block on the anti-money laundering law. If you're not comfortable, ask, because you don't know what kind of business you're going in. And you need to make sure that person, the head of this Web3 person, does satisfy you in terms of risk and compliance. I see that a lot because it's transformation. It's new business. They want to capture younger market. This is what all businesses do. They will always have a unit that is the innovative part, and they have no clue what they're really entering. And that's where I don't want to say that there's a lot of scandals coming out. But if you don't know what you sign up for, just really ask or just offboard it, because business can be creative, but somebody has to be reliable on that, because we do pretty much in the business world, and the jurisdiction is still pretty much you need the CEO or the board of directors are liable with all this. Fund went missing. If you're not doing something on a bona fide purpose and good faith, you have to manage that. So being a director is high risk if you don't know what you're signing up for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is something that we see across the board with most startup founders. I work with a lot of startups. So I see a lot of startups entering into the blockchain space, and they don't fully realize the weight of responsibility they have on their shoulders as directors in terms of the liability that it attaches. Just because you have an LLC doesn't exempt you completely from liability when you should have avoided extreme negligent behavior or reckless behavior that leads to losses, especially when you're dealing with consumer funds. It's not a joke. So speaking of which, so for a fintech choosing blockchain intelligence vendor tomorrow, what would be the 3 non-negotiable features that must be in the RFP?
Blockchain analytics world is pretty much like your name screening in the Web2 world. Like today, Sanat wants to onboard one person or few person in your company. You have to do background check. So blockchain analytics does the same thing, but it's something called wallet address. It's on-chain data. So the number one thing that people should look up to is that how many chain they support. Some blockchain, I see a lot of my new competitors, they can't even support like Arbitrum, or maybe like blockchain that they can support. That will be a little bit dangerous because you're supposed to have a variety and the blockchain to support. This is number one. And number two is that you have to test on data strength. A lot of my competitors say they might not have a lot of local data. So you have to test in and out that if you're operating in Bahrain or somewhere like in Taiwan or somewhere in Hong Kong, if you're buying a system, does the blockchain analytics company support this country? Meaning, do they have data that they are supporting? Like a wallet address that is a US-based company will not have a lot of data on-chain, off-chain in Bahrain because it's a different geolocation.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one, of course, is the customer experience in terms of like functionality. If today your system can only say, I can only do KYT, but there's no investigative kind of function, that is not good because you can do screening on the KYT side. But if you want to do further EDD and you don't have that function, with some of the blockchain analytics world, they don't sell both. They just sell you one. Razin, you know what I'm talking about. And then you cannot further investigate if there's 3 data points that say transaction 1, transaction 2, transaction 3. You can't even draw a graph. Oh, that one is not good because you can't investigate further. Everyone should have the rights to investigate, and you are being limited in that sense. Why you need the blockchain analytics? A lot of my ex-customer come back and say is that, Jess, we need the investigative function. I say, why? I just, cordially just want to test why they say so. Oh, it flagged out the transaction. I was like, what to do next? Of course, it's investigate. And you ask it too late now. So it's when you buy the blockchain analytics tool, you should ask for the investigative function as well for screening, for flagging out transaction. And you can investigate. That tool is not meaningful to you. You cannot do your job. It's just half done. And you're doing compliance work. It's supposed to be ring fencing. You're doing defense. It's not a joke, man. So this is what I always tell people. Really know your product before you even buy. Don't buy because they are popular and they are really branded in marketing. That's what I say.
100% agree. Like for businesses out there, like due diligence is not just what you should do just because it's a compliance requirement. And you also need to do due diligence, like what you said, not just because of the branding. The systems and data must match or must be compatible with your business before you even choose them. So yeah, for businesses, due diligence is important. And, you have wide range of experience in your career. What advice would you give to someone who's starting out, in the same field as you in crypto compliance or in blockchain intelligence? Do you have any advice? How can they start?
I love this question. Razin and Sana, can I now counter ask you this question? In your Australian days that you guys started out during your law school, was blockchain even a term that you talked to your friend?
No, absolutely not. No. I remember actually reading about Bitcoin around that time, but to me it was such a trivial thing that I didn't even think about it.
And maybe
at the time,
you'll be asking how much is that, right? The Bitcoin then.
I looked into it. I remember it was cents to the dollar. So I was like, who cares?
Razin?
No, I did not think about blockchain. I only started thinking about blockchain probably like half of my career.
Okay.
So it's still completely new to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So our future generation, the one that's going to lead our world in the next 30 years, probably these are a little bit too old for them. So you can't really look for career like me and Razin and Sana in, say, Monster, the job searching website, Monster, Hey Recruitment, Robert Waters, that kind. I don't think that they will start building this career candidate for the company. I feel like to really come into crypto compliance, forensic, crime lawyers around MiCA, say for example, you want to be very proficient in what you do. To start with is really find out the interest, what you like to do. I know that since young, when I was doing my ACCA, I wanted to do forensic because that is what I was built for. And of course, I didn't become a forensic accountant because I really don't want to match it that 1 cent to that 1 cent evidence that I'm not interested in that. And I know that I'm built for data. I knew that when I was 21 years old, I knew that something about forensic and data, I need to marry them and I need to work in the hybrid mode. And I want to introduce one concept called ikigai in the Japanese concept. You need to get the fulfillment. It's always in the interception point here and it's always changing. So to give the advice to the youngster out from this podcast, first of all, you need to know what you like. Really is your interest that lies with what you want so that you can build a career out of that. And secondly is that the dream job that you want to find often is not here, is out there, but you just have to read a lot and get acquainted with the right people. I don't want to give you that answer is that when I was young, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer. That one is also changed a lot. Look at Sanat now. Probably as a lawyer and as Razin, who is a law graduate, probably you guys have never thought that now you're advising customer on like startup, on legal compliance, in legal opinion, or Razin, who is like the frontier on designing, this kind of data. You did with the FinTech Association Malaysia with all this data sharing for crypto compliance thing. That one is, who knows, back in 2015 that this existed, right? It's evolving. So I feel like you really need to know who you are before you can have the determinant on what you're going to decide next to do, knowing yourself.
Absolutely. And you have a lot of great advice out there, but unfortunately we're reaching at the end. I want to talk a lot more about FinCrime, but we are reaching the end of our podcast. But before that, if people want to know more about you or people want to learn more about your advice, where can they find you? Where can they follow you? You
just have to go to my LinkedIn, and I respond to my LinkedIn a lot. And of course, you're my friend, you can just WhatsApp me. But pretty much I have established this mindset is that I always feel like I will have to work with younger people the more older I get. So connect with me, see what kind of projects we can work together, because I won't want to work with the uncles in their 60s or the aunties in their 60s about blockchain. Probably they don't know much. So I feel like I have to decide I have to work with younger people so that they can also teach me one or two things that I don't know. The world is really changing a lot. I feel like we have to learn from all sorts of people. Today, if you want to contact me, it's very simple. Just go to my LinkedIn and just DM me. And I'm responsive with all the responses and DMs.
Yep. Very fantastic session, from Netflix production, criminal activity, to how we can improve the crypto compliance better. We've learned a lot. So thank you so much for your presence and your contribution to the podcast. We hope to see you again.